Reading with your kids.
Hola, niho, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, morimulawanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you are joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Good Plays, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Lindsay Gizicki. She returns to the show to celebrate Guardians of the Garden. Before we invite Lindsay into the studio, I need to ask you, does your kids' school have a podcast? If not, they need one. A local school podcast can promote daily family reading, raise test scores, improve parent-school communication. Are you ready to embark on an innovative journey that merges education with entertainment? Our school podcasting service offers an unparalleled opportunity to embrace the art of podcasting enriched with the magic of literature. The Reading with Your Kids podcast has been helping families all over the world grow closer through reading since 2017. We have a library of over 800 hours of interviews with many of the most respected authors in children's literature. Creating a school podcast with us gives you access to a treasure trove of content that you can use to captivate your audience. Let these stories spark discussions, ignite imagination, and cultivate a love of reading. We are really excited about this program and hope that you will take a minute to find out a little bit more. I know you might not be this principal of your kid's school or a teacher or a counselor, but you know them and you know how busy they are and you know that they don't have time to investigate every interesting new idea that comes their way. You can help them out. Visit readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Your School Needs a Podcast button up at the top of the page. Learn more about the program yourself and then share it with the teachers who love your kids. Join us right now from right outside of Detroit in the wonderful state of Michigan. Our guest is here today to celebrate her beautiful new picture book. It's called Guardians of the Garden. Please welcome back to the show, Lindsay Gizicki. Hey, Lindsay, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing great, Jed. Thank you for having me again.
I am delighted to have you on. Did I use the R's in the right place of Guardians of the Garden? It's hard for folks here in Boston with those words.
Yeah, no, you got the hard R's correct. You did great.
Excellent. So tell us about this great book.
Sure. Well, in the Guardians of the Garden, we have two kids who are protecting their backyard garden from pesky critters, which is very relatable for most people who have backyard gardens. You have your chipmunks, you have rabbits, you have birds, but the most mischievous animal of all is the squirrels.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Very relatable.
I absolutely can relate. For some reason, well, first up, we'll address the squirrel issue. Here in beautiful Reedville, it may have been, the squirrels aren't as prevalent and as much of a problem as they were before. They were a pretty big problem because they made a nest inside my beautiful wife's engine and caused about $1,500 worth of damage. So we had to remove a beautiful oak tree, not because of the squirrels, but because it was probably going to fall and crush our house. Mm-hmm. So we don't notice them as much anymore. But the rabbits here in Reedville, we live within 12 miles of downtown Boston. We're part of the city, and I walk out at dusk and I see 100 rabbits running around the neighborhood. And it's all within the last year or two, and they eat all of my wife's beautiful hofstras. And so she is not happy at all.
I feel her pain. You know, I have maybe one bunny per summer, but it's the squirrels. Yeah, no, they are one of the most mischievous creatures I have ever encountered. And in the book, we go over exactly what they do to us. And some might think I'm embellishing for entertaining children, and I'm not. One of the spreads, they're throwing acorns at us from the trees, and that has actually happened.
Yes, I can attest to that. They are mischievous is a very generous word. Yeah. And we'll leave it at that. This is a family podcast, so yeah, and
Yeah.
it's so we've established that there are these critters that a lot of folks think of as cute and adorable, but are very mischievous and cause a lot of damage, and some of that damage is very costly, as I outlined. So what are we to do short of going out there with, lethal weapons?
Well, it's much more playful in the Guardians of the Garden. And in the Guardians, they're hiding behind bushes and screaming "rawr," and it's very much from real life is what my kids taught me about guarding our garden. Last summer, well, I'll start every year as a family, we put together our garden in the spring. It's something that we do annually. It's a pastime my kids have come to love. They love planting. They love watering. They take care of it every day, which is great. And last summer, they caught the squirrels eating their cherry tomatoes, and they were beside themselves. They had worked so hard planting. Every day they're out there watering, and the worst part for them was the squirrels were eating like half of it and throwing the rest out. And they couldn't even eat all of it. I remember them telling me like it was like an insult to them. So they started, bringing bubble machines around the garden and thinking maybe the bubbles will keep them away. And they started making a game out of it. It was all very playful and fun. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe you could have a bubble machine by your car so they don't get in your engine again.
Well, we've gone high tech with the car. We bought some kind of system that an alarm goes off if there's something crawling around inside the engine, and like strobe lights and all that stuff. But the most successful thing my wife has done in terms of our vegetable garden that we typically will have on our deck is she uses pinwheels. Those simple little reflecting pinwheels that it's kind of like the squirrels are like, I don't know what that is. I ain't gonna mess with it.
Right. So we tried pinwheels. Pinwheels worked for the squirrels, and then all of a sudden in came the birds. The birds could care less about the pinwheels. Uh-huh. So we planted strawberries for the first time last year, and they didn't take off. And then this year it was amazing. It just like our garden, like the strawberries took over, and we lost the entire first batch from the birds. They came in and pecked them clean. So we did. We tried attempting pinwheels. That did not work. We tried attempting the netting, and the netting finally kept the birds away. But the squirrels, the mischievous squirrels, knew how to pick up the netting and go under it. I don't know, Jed. I don't think the Michigan squirrels are very advanced.
It sounds like them. Well, you get the tough city squirrels there, so
Yeah, perhaps that's it.
Well, I'm hoping that the moral of the story is stop planting and just go to the supermarket.
It's definitely not. The moral of the story is the kids learn that the birds and nature loves to eat just as much as we do. So toward the end of the book, it's fall, and we have everything that we've spent all summer and summer curating, and we have too much. So in the end, the very last spreads, they are sharing their food that they made with the animals.
Wonderful.
Which, like I said, it's all in good fun. Yeah. It's very frustrating, but if you take care of it enough, you always have extras, right?
I agree. And I love the fact that in the book we're talking about sharing. And I don't mind sharing with the rabbits and the squirrels, except when they get there first and they eat half of everything. And it's not just like there's 50 and they eat 25 of them. They eat half of all 50. And that's then it's,
right.
I don't know about you, but I'm not going to pick up half of a tomato that was eaten by a squirrel and cut up the remaining part.
Right, which is why we spend all summer defending the garden, and at the end we give them what's left over.
Yeah. This must be a lot of fun. I mean, obviously it's a lot of fun for your kids to create the garden. How much fun was it for them to watch you put this story into a book?
Oh, they love it. They love it. As you know, my first book was kind of about my son and To the Moon and Back. My second book, The Pirate Doctor, was very much my daughter. And they are just so ecstatic that this book, it's, quote unquote, the both of them. Even though the characters don't look like them, to them, it's them. They know they are the defenders of the garden. So, yeah, no, they love it. They love to see the antics that they got in with the critters on the pages, and they love the story, and we talk about it all the time. They are so excited to see themselves on the pages.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, we should probably hit on this. I had to be very, very careful when I was introducing you and introducing the book, not to make a mistake and tell everybody that you are the author of Guardians of the Galaxy. Has that come up a lot? Are people giving you credit for something that you didn't create?
Definitely not. Thankfully, Marvel's been along for a very long time, and it's been well established where I'm not associated with it at all. But yeah, no, people laugh. They love the title of it, and they ask, "Oh, are you a Marvel fan? Do you like Guardians of the Galaxy?" And my answer is yes to both. But it's not relevant, and it's not related. And luckily, there's been no confusion as to who gets credit for which.
And I think it's a lot of fun when you're, creating a book and creating titles to be playful and to get something that kids can relate to. I mean, there's lots of kids out there who are into the Guardians of the Galaxy and all those characters, and it would be a lot of fun. And it is a lot of fun to think, oh, we also have to be guardians and protect our gardens and, things that we're creating around the house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. My son's only 3, and he's very Marvel obsessed currently, so I think the title really resonates with him.
So Marvel obsessed at 3. Mm-hmm. My son was also Marvel and Disney and all that obsessed at 3, and he's 30, and it doesn't go away. I don't mean to scare you, but it doesn't.
Yeah, I was surprised how early it started. He was 2. And he was pretending he was Spider-Man and Thor. Thor is actually his favorite. And I was just thinking, I've never let you watch Marvel movies because it's a little too old. So how do you know who any of these people are? It was like it was ingrained in his DNA.
Well, this is going to sound like I'm shoehorning this in, but I just yesterday I was visiting an old teacher of mine, someone who taught a media literacy course. With that I attended and learned so much from. And she's a Catholic nun. And I kind of going into it, I'm kind of expecting, okay, so this nun is going to start off giving me a list of books that I shouldn't let my kids read and ban this type of media and that type of media. And instead, she was very clear with, don't try to ban anything. It's not going to work. Your kid's going to be exposed to it. And here you're just proving the point that, here you have a 3-year-old and you haven't actively sat down and watched any of these characters with the kids, but your kid is very much aware of it. So I think, the lesson that she taught me, which was to sit down and experience media with your kids and have conversations with them, starting as early as you can, and that way when they eventually run into whatever it is that you're afraid they're going to run into, because they are, you're going to be able to sit down and have conversations about it.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And it's very important. My son starts school for the first time in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So, there's some violence to the Marvel movies. So I want him to understand that the Marvel movies and the superheroes are fantastic and the idea of them are great, but in the reality, they're not real, and the violence is very real, and we have to approach things with that mindset, I think.
Yeah. Leave that sledgehammer at home.
He does have Thor's hammer, and luckily it's made of foam, but that doesn't stop him from using it against his sister.
Yes, yes. And foam or not, the assaulting with a hammer is not acceptable in schools.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So we'll see how the first year goes.
Hey, we mentioned that both of us live in pretty great cities. You're outside of Detroit. I am within the city limits of Boston, but, right at the outskirts of the city. Both of our cities are pretty wonderful and are growing and dynamic, but also both of our cities have some challenges. And as I understand it, Guardians of the Garden, it's going to be helping some of the challenges that Detroit is facing.
Yeah, so I was really excited for this book to partner with a nonprofit. 10% of the proceeds that I make from the book on my website sales and from in-person events go directly toward a Detroit nonprofit called Rescue My Nature Now. And it was started some years ago. What they do is they take some of the abandoned parcels in Detroit and they turn them into community gardens. And it's awesome. And there's so much more than just planting, fruits and veggies. They also bring in the youth in Detroit and teach them how to take care of their gardens. A lot of the houses in Detroit don't really have backyards, and they don't have a lot of room to have a backyard garden like we do. So they make these places where they can have access to fruits and vegetables and produce and everything that they are able to make themselves and be pesticide free and know that what they're planting is healthy. And they know where it came from, which is a huge issue with food these days, is you don't really know where it's coming from and you don't know what happened to it during that time period. And yeah, so they're making a community garden where they can thrive in Detroit, which is fantastic. And they're also beekeepers. So they're also teaching the youth about honey and making your own honey. And they do so much for the city of Detroit. They are wonderful. I was so happy to partner with them for this book.
Well, that is fantastic. And one of the I don't have many regrets in my life. I have been so blessed in so many different ways. I really wish we could do some beekeeping here. I'm very allergic to bees, and so we can't. It's ugly when I get stung. But it just seems like such a wonderful and very necessary hobby these days to really kind of help all of our pollinators, the bees and the butterflies, and, all of them thrive because they are so challenged these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. We're lucky enough in Michigan to have so many local beekeepers. Actually, my neighbor 4 doors down from me right now is a beekeeper, and I always buy his local honey. Local honey is so good for you because the bees, it's included with the pollinates from local, so it helps my allergies a lot. If I put the honey in my tea, it really helps my allergies. So yeah, it's an interesting concept. But no, we're really lucky to have a lot of access to a lot of farming and every such sort of thing in Michigan. Yeah, it's not just that we're a big city.
Yeah,
we've got a lot of farmland too, so we're a good mix here in Michigan.
That's one of the things I've had the blessing of being able to drive back and forth across the continent, and of course up and down the East Coast, too many times to even remember. But in so many places, Boston, Detroit, Philadelphia, you're in these big cities, but if you get in a car and drive an hour, you're in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And it's so wonderful. You're way more closer to nature than you realize.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have that in Michigan. The far north you get, it's wild. I mean, not a few years ago, God, it was a long time ago, almost 10 years ago now, I went to the UP, the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, and it is a whole different world up there. And sometimes you forget that you're actually technically still in Michigan. Mm-hmm. It just feels so wild and so untouched in a lot of ways. Like Pictured Rocks are infamous in Michigan. They're just stunning. I got actually engaged in Tequendama Falls, and it's just one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And you know what else is wonderful? The fact that this book, I think, really encourages families to get out into nature, because even when we're within a city like Boston or Detroit or even New York City, we can find spots of nature and help our kids fall in love with the natural world.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And, some of the reviews have come out already for the book, and everyone just can relate to it so much, which is so heartwarming. I've had so many people comment, "Oh, I love this book. It reminds me of my kids. We love gardening in the backyard. We love playing in the backyard. We love doing this, doing that. And my kids love our backyard garden. And, I can relate to the squirrels. Everyone always comes back to the squirrels." So, yeah, it really strikes a chord with parents, which is the point. Yeah. It's definitely the point. In the end, it's them defending their garden, but also their mother's garden and the garden that they do with their mom. And it's very much family ties in the book.
Yeah. I've said it before, I started the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If I were a smarter person, I would have done it because, Reading with Your Kids helps build empathy, and they hear so many more words, and they get to practice, situations that they may face in real life later on. I started the podcast because I know that the reason I'm still close with both of my adult kids right now is because of the time we spent reading together. And reading together led to watching TV together and playing ball together and gardening together. And so the podcast is really all about, yes, read with your kids, but that's just the jumping off point to doing everything with your kids. And it's such a beautiful thing. And gardening is certainly something that is a wonderful family activity to do.
I agree. And you don't have to be an expert gardener. I grew up with a mom who loved to garden, and I really didn't find joy in gardening till a few years ago, honestly. So I'm learning the same time I'm teaching my kids what I'm learning. So it's been a great learning experience. My husband has more active interest in gardening, and that's kind of what got my jump start in gardening, because he was like, "Let's build a garden for the kids." So yeah, you don't need to be an expert. It's definitely a learning process. I'm still learning.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, we should learn where we can go to find out more about Guardians of the Garden.
Yeah, of course. So the book is available on Amazon or on my website at hankarureadings.com.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the author of Guardians of the Garden. And remember, if you go to Lindsay's website and you purchase a book, a portion of the proceeds are going to go to that wonderful nonprofit in Detroit that's helping. And that is wonderful. Our guest has been Lindsay Gizicki. Lindsay, thanks so much for being back with us.
Thank you again for having me, Jed.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. Until then, we want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Lindsay Gizicki. Please be sure to check out Guardians of the Garden. I also want to thank everybody in advance who went to readingwithyourkids.com and clicked on the Your School Needs a Podcast button up the top of the page. We're really excited about this program. We'd love to come in and help the folks in your community create their own school podcast. It's a really exciting way to improve communication between families and schools, help raise test scores, and of course, help kids develop a love of reading and learning, and help families read more together. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Ann O'Leary, Soji Franklin, Monica Rivera Sosa. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.